Hello students, how are you? In the last video, we had completed with the explanation part of chapter 3, Deep Water of our book Flamingo. In this video, we shall be discussing the questions given in this chapter. Let us start with the questions which have been given under Think as you read. The first set of questions under Think as you read. Let us do them. Question number 1. What is the misadventure that William Douglas speaks about? When William Douglas was 11 years of age, then he was learning swimming at YMCA swimming pool. But he had gone only 2 to 3 days, and one day when he was sitting beside the pool waiting for other boys to come there, a big bruiser kind of boy, a boy with rippling muscles, threw him inside the pool and inside the deeper end of the pool, and he was almost drowned. He almost was dead. So this was the misadventure which William Douglas is speaking about. Now question number 2 is, what were the series of emotions and fear that Douglas experienced when he was thrown into the pool? What plans did he make to come to the surface? See, at first Douglas was frightened. He was very frightened. But still he could make up a strategy. And the strategy was that when he would touch the bottom of the swimming pool, then he would make a big spring upwards. He would come to the surface. He would float through the edge of the pool and paddle there. This was his strategy. But first time when he drowned and went and touched the bottom of the swimming pool, he made what he thought to be a big jump. But then he could not reach the upper surface of the pool. And while this process, he was swallowing in water. His throat was completely choked because it was filled with water. He could not shout. He was completely frightened. His legs, they felt paralyzed. They felt stiff, limp. There was a dirty, his eyes could see only dirty tinge of water. And when he came up, then his eyes came up, his nose came up, but then he again went down for the second time. That means he could not paddle to the edge of the pool. Then again he was stuck completely because he was trying to reach for the ladders, for the ropes, but then he could not see anything excepting rope. He wanted to scream, but no sound came out, and he was completely in fear. For the second time also, when he came up, his eyes were only up, and then his nose was down only, and he went down for the third time when that fear was very, very intense. But then all of a sudden everything was dark, and there was a blackness which swept across his brain. So these were the series of his emotions. The plan was the same, that when he would reach the bottom of the swimming pool, then he would make a big jump, and then he would come up at the edge and paddle across the water. The third question. How did this experience affect him? See, first of all, the immediate effect was that he was shivering, he was trembling with fear, he couldn't eat that night, he couldn't sleep for several days. He felt wobbly in his knees, and for several days there was a haunting fear in his mind. But then later on he saw and he realized that whenever he was in the water, the same terror of water came back to him. So that means this misadventure affected him very adversely. He could not enjoy his fishing trips, his boating and canoeing trips. Okay, so let's proceed to the next set of questions. And the first question, and the thing as you read is, why was Douglas determined to get over his fear of water? Okay, we need to know that this fear of water was very intense, and he couldn't enjoy his fishing trips, he couldn't enjoy his boating or canoeing, he couldn't even enjoy the cascades, waterfall and all. So he was determined to conquer his fear of water. Second question is, how did the instructor build a swimmer out of Douglas? Okay, this process was step by step. First of all, the instructor, what did he do? He put a belt across William Douglas. He tied a rope to that belt. That rope went over to an overhead cable attached to a pulley, and its end was in the hands of the instructor. So the first step was that the instructor, he released and held the rope. That means the writer William Douglas, when the instructor released the rope, that means he went inside water, and when he held, that means he was above water, back and forth. So in this process, whenever he was inside water, William Douglas was inside water, a part of fear was there which he shed away. Then the instructor taught him to exhale when he was above the water surface, and exhale when he was inside the water, below the water surface, and exhale when he was above the water surface. After that, he taught him how to kick his legs in the water. So he taught him how to command the position of his legs. Then after these various techniques, when the instructor felt that all the parts William Douglas has perfected, then he joined all the parts and asked him to swim. He taught him all the strokes, and at last he told him that he could swim and he should now means his training was complete. The second question, how did Douglas make sure that he conquered the old terror? Okay, so first of all, he went by the side of first of all, he swam alone for 2 to 3 months, from April to July. He swam alone in the swimming pool. Then he came to Lake Wentworth. He swam there because he had some doubts left. And only once the terror of water came. After that, he had some residual doubts, for which he went by the side of Warm Lake. And there he dived and he swam all the kinds of stroke to and fro. After that, he was sure that he had learned swimming and he was released out of his fear of water. Okay. Now, let's come to the questions under understanding the text. There are 2 questions given. First question is, how does Douglas make clear to the reader the sense of panic that gripped him as he almost drowned? Now describe the details that have made the description vivid. See, you can here quote the lines of the chapter. First, he was very frightened, but then he made the strategy that when he would hit the bottom, he would spring upwards. But he says that he hit the bottom in a sitting position, because he was sitting when he was thrown inside the swimming pool at the deeper end. Then he writes that there was water with a yellow tinge, dirty, dark yellow tinge. He writes that his hands, they stretched for ropes, ladders, but they could get only water. He wanted to shout, to scream for help, but no sound came out from his throat. His throat was completely choked. Then he wrote about his legs. His legs felt completely limp, heavy. They felt paralyzed. They felt stiff and rigid. Then he wrote how he was, he had made many helpless, fruitless efforts to come over the surface of water. He writes how his eyes and nose were above water, but then he couldn't totally come above water. Second time also his eyes were only outside the water, but then he couldn't come above the water. So these kind of experiences he wrote. Again he tried again and again to call for help, but there was nobody. He remembered his mother. He remembered he wanted help, but there was nobody and nothing there. Okay. Now he also writes about the panic, that sensation of dying. He writes how there was complete blackness sweeping across his head and all. Now the second question. How did Douglas overcome his fear of water? First of all, the first step to overcome his fear of water was to learn swimming. For that, he hired an instructor, and he did not hurry, he did not rush upon anything. With his instructor, from October till April, he learned how to swim. This was the first thing. And please write about the various steps in a very detailed way. Then the swimming, he could do. He knew how to swim, but then his job was to overcome his fear. So what did he do? He swam in the swimming pool alone for several months. From April to July, he swam in the swimming pool alone when nobody was there. And bit by bit, he shed away part of his fear. Then remove the remaining fear, he went to Lake Wentworth. And while swimming there, only once did his terror come back to him. But then he braved that terror very strongly, in a very nice way. Like he said that Mr. Terror want to scare me, and then he dived off. But then still he had his residual doubts. For that he went to Worm Lake, and there he swam across nearly all kinds of stroke. And then he knew that he had completely subdued his fear of water. Okay. Question number 3 is, why does Douglas as an adult recount a childhood experience of terror and his conquering of it? What larger meaning does he draw from this experience? See, actually he wants to share this experience with the readers, with everyone, because he wants to clarify, to explain to them that there is no fear in death, there is fear in fear of death, because death is very peaceful. He also wants to say that once you have known stark terror and then you have conquered that terror, then your will to live becomes more intense. Okay. Now we have 2 questions under talking about the text. The first question says, all we have to fear is fear itself. Have you ever had a fear that you have now overcome? Share your experience with your partner. Now this is a subjective part. If you had any fear and you have overcome that, then please write about it. Don't take help of any guidebook. Write of your own. See, everybody has his fear. I was very afraid of darkness. You'll laugh that I was afraid when the clouds were there hovering on the sky. If I was not at home and I saw clouds, I was very afraid. So how I overcame that, that's a kind of story which I shall tell to you when we shall meet. But now you write down this question, because everybody has some kind of fear and you must know how to conquer that fear. Okay. Now second part is find and narrate other stories about conquest of fear and what people have said about courage. For example, you can recall Nelson Mandela's struggle for freedom, his perseverance to achieve his mission, to liberate the oppressed and oppressor as depicted in his autobiography. The story We Are Not Afraid to Die, which you have read in class 11, is an apt example of how courage and optimism helped a family survive under the direst stress. So actually you have to write about the conquest of fear. For this, the question has referred to chapters. The first chapter is of Nelson Mandela, which is prose number 2 in class 10th. You can get it from net, and when you read it, you'll see that Nelson Mandela says that courage is not the absence of fear, it is our triumph over it. Okay, he says that courage is not the absence of fear. Everybody is afraid, but the real courage is how we conquer that fear, our victory over it. Okay, and then in class 11th you must have read We Are Not Afraid to Die, If We Can All Be Together, and how with courage this whole family is able to sustain this condition and reach the island when they are in the sea. So please read both the chapters and write down the answer. So I hope we have done almost each and every part from this lesson. If you have any doubt, please write down that doubt, and in our interactive doubt taking session we shall be dealing with them. Till then, take good care of yourselves. Goodbye.